There is a certain kind of spiritual journey that does not begin with light, comfort, or uplifting ideas, but with discomfort, questions, and the uneasy feeling that reality is far deeper and darker than it first appears. Some paths invite you into peaceful temples filled with incense and gentle chants. Others take you to the edges of human experience, where fear, death, and the unknown are not avoided but examined closely. The path of Aghora belongs to the latter. It speaks to the part of the human spirit that is not satisfied with surface-level understanding, that wants to look directly at life in its rawest form and still find truth within it. Imagine being raised to believe that purity means staying away from anything unpleasant. Most people are taught to avoid death, decay, and suffering, to turn their eyes toward what is clean and socially acceptable. But there exists an ancient way of thinking that challenges this instinct completely. It suggests that nothing in existence is truly impure, and that the divisions people create between holy and unholy are products of fear and misunderstanding. The Aghori perspective invites a radical shift in perception. What if everything in the universe, even what seems repulsive, is an expression of the same divine reality? This way of seeing does not come from philosophy alone but from lived experience guided by a mysterious spiritual teacher whose presence feels both unsettling and magnetic. Through conversations and observations, the listener is slowly introduced to a worldview that refuses to separate spirituality from the harsher aspects of existence. Death is not treated as a tragedy to hide from but as a natural transformation. Cremation grounds, which most people avoid out of fear, become places of meditation and reflection. The constant reminder of mortality is not meant to depress the mind but to strip away illusions about permanence and ego. At first, such ideas feel extreme, even shocking. How can someone find peace in places associated with grief and endings? The answer lies in understanding attachment. Much of human suffering comes from clinging to identity, possessions, relationships, and the idea of control. When life inevitably disrupts these attachments, pain follows. By confronting impermanence directly rather than pretending it does not exist, a person gradually weakens the grip of fear. What remains is a deeper acceptance of life as it truly is, unpredictable, cyclical, and far more vast than personal concerns. The guide on this journey speaks with a mix of humor, sharp insight, and unsettling clarity. He dismantles common spiritual fantasies, especially the idea that enlightenment is a glamorous escape from ordinary life. Instead, real growth often involves facing one's own hypocrisy, hidden desires, and fears. The mind has a clever way of disguising selfish motives as noble intentions. A person may believe they are acting selflessly while secretly seeking praise or recognition. True spiritual work requires ruthless honesty with oneself, an ability to observe the ego without flinching. One of the most powerful ideas presented is that disgust and attraction are two sides of the same mental habit, judgment. The mind constantly labels experiences as good or bad, pleasant or unpleasant, desirable or repulsive. These labels shape emotional reactions and behavior, creating invisible chains. The Aghori approach attempts to break these chains by training the mind to witness without immediately reacting. When judgment softens, reality appears less fragmented. The same world remains, but it feels more unified, less threatening. Such discipline does not develop through comfortable routines. It is forged through practices that deliberately challenge mental conditioning. Spending time in places associated with death, meditating on images people normally avoid, and reflecting deeply on bodily impermanence all serve to dissolve false identities. The body, often worshipped or obsessively maintained, is seen as a temporary vessel rather than the core of existence. This realization does not lead to neglect but to balance. When obsession fades, respect naturally replaces vanity. Yet this path is not about rejecting society or pretending emotions do not exist. It is about understanding them so thoroughly that they no longer dominate perception. Fear, desire, pride, and shame are studied like passing weather patterns rather than permanent truths. Over time, reactions slow down. Space appears between stimulus and response. In that space, awareness grows stronger. Life begins to feel less like a series of uncontrollable events and more like a continuous process unfolding exactly as it must. A subtle transformation starts to take place. Situations that once caused clearly. Compassion deepens, not from moral obligation but from recognizing that every person struggles with the same illusions of separateness. Judgment softens because it becomes obvious that everyone is learning through their own experiences, however messy those experiences may be. The journey feels less like climbing toward heaven and more like peeling away layers of misunderstanding. Each layer removed reveals another attachment, another hidden fear, another assumption about how life should be. Gradually, resistance gives way to acceptance. Acceptance gives way to stillness. And within that stillness arises a quiet understanding that nothing in existence is outside the scope of the sacred. But such understanding does not arrive all at once. It unfolds through encounters, stories, and moments that challenge comfort again and again, drawing the seeker deeper into territories most people never dare to explore, where the boundary between the terrifying and the divine begins to disappear. And it is in those unsettling spaces that the next stage of the journey quietly begins to reveal itself. There comes a moment in any deep inner journey when curiosity shifts into confrontation. What once felt like an interesting philosophy slowly becomes a mirror, and that mirror begins reflecting parts of the self that were carefully hidden. It is easy to discuss detachment and spiritual awareness in comfortable settings, but it is entirely different to face situations that shake emotional stability. The path unfolding here moves steadily into that unsettling territory, where ideas are no longer abstract and life itself becomes the testing ground. Spending time close to death changes the rhythm of thought. The mind, usually busy with plans, comparisons, and petty worries, starts recognizing how fragile every human structure really is. Watching bodies reduce to ash dissolves the illusion of permanence that silently drives ambition and anxiety. Titles, achievements, possessions, and social status begin to look like temporary costumes worn for a brief performance. This recognition is not meant to create hopelessness but to bring clarity. When the fear of losing everything weakens, a strange lightness emerges. One begins to live more fully, not because life is permanent, but precisely because it is not. As comfort zones dissolve, the teachings become less about rituals and more about perception. The real discipline lies in observing the mind's constant need to divide experience. Pleasure is chased, pain is resisted, and neutrality is ignored. This endless movement creates restlessness. But when someone deliberately sits in places or situations that would normally be avoided, a shift occurs. The mind initially reacts with discomfort, even panic, yet if the person remains still and watchful, the intensity slowly fades. What seemed unbearable reveals itself as a passing wave. This simple but powerful observation begins loosening the belief that happiness depends on controlling external circumstances. A deeper insight unfolds through this process. Suffering is amplified not by events themselves but by resistance to them. When something unpleasant happens, the mind adds layers of protest, questioning why it happened, imagining how things should be different, and fearing future repetitions. These mental reactions multiply the original pain. But when resistance softens, experience flows more naturally. Pain may still arise, but it does not carry the same psychological weight. The difference is subtle yet transformative. Instead of feeling trapped inside every emotional storm, a person begins to witness it from a slight distance. This distance does not create coldness or indifference. On the contrary, it allows emotions to be felt more honestly because they are no longer tangled with panic or denial. Grief can be experienced without collapsing into despair. Joy can be appreciated without clinging to it desperately. Anger can be observed without instantly turning into aggression. Emotional life becomes cleaner, simpler, and more truthful. In this clarity, compassion grows naturally. Seeing one's own mental struggles reflected in others creates understanding without the need for moral superiority. The relationship with fear undergoes one of the most dramatic transformations. Fear usually thrives in avoidance. The less a person understands something, the more power it holds over the imagination. Darkness seems threatening because it hides what cannot be seen. But when someone walks directly into that darkness with awareness, imagination loses its exaggerated grip. The unknown slowly becomes familiar. This does not mean danger disappears, but irrational fear weakens. A calm alertness replaces nervous tension. Such fearlessness is often misunderstood. It is about survival, reputation, and control begins to fade. This shift frees enormous mental energy. Attention, once scattered across countless worries, becomes steady and grounded in the present moment. Another subtle layer of transformation involves identity. Most people carry rigid ideas about who they are, their roles, beliefs, preferences, and personal histories. These identities provide comfort but also create limitation. Any challenge to them feels threatening, but intense spiritual examination reveals how fluid identity actually is. Thoughts change, emotions fluctuate, beliefs evolve, and the body itself transforms over time. Clinging to a fixed self-image creates tension because reality refuses to stay still. By observing this constant change without resistance, identity becomes lighter, more flexible. One stops defending personal narratives so aggressively. Conversations become more open because there is less need to be right. Mistakes are easier to admit because they no longer feel like attacks on the self. This flexibility brings psychological freedom that rigid certainty never could. Gradually, the search for spiritual experiences also begins to lose its charm. The mind often turns spirituality into another ambition, chasing visions, powers, or dramatic transformations. But genuine awareness grows quietly, without spectacle. It appears in simple moments, in silent observation, in honest reflection, in patient listening. The need for extraordinary validation fades as ordinary existence reveals unexpected depth. This growing simplicity changes how relationships are experienced. Instead of seeking constant emotional reassurance, one begins offering steadiness. Instead of demanding understanding, one learns to listen. Interactions become less about fulfilling personal expectations and more about shared presence. Even conflict feels different when the ego is less invested in winning. There is space to pause, to reflect, to respond thoughtfully rather than react impulsively. Over time, a calm resilience develops. External situations continue to change, sometimes unpredictably, yet inner balance remains more stable. Success does not inflate the ego as easily, and failure does not crush the spirit as deeply. Life's fluctuations begin to resemble changing seasons rather than personal attacks. This perspective creates quiet confidence, not the loud confidence that seeks attention, but a steady assurance rooted in acceptance. And yet, just when this stability begins to feel familiar, new questions arise. If everything is accepted as it is, what motivates action? If identity becomes fluid, what anchors purpose? If fear dissolves, what guides decisions? These questions pull the seeker into even subtler layers of understanding, where action and stillness, purpose and surrender, begin to merge in unexpected ways, opening the door to insights that challenge even the deepest assumptions about control and free will. As understanding deepens, a subtle shift begins to take place in the way action itself is perceived. Most people move through life driven by desire and fear, constantly trying to secure favorable outcomes while avoiding anything that threatens comfort. Every decision becomes a calculation, every effort tied to expectation. This creates an invisible tension that rarely fades, because results are never fully within personal control. But when awareness matures, action slowly detaches from this anxious need for guarantees. Effort remains sincere, yet the emotional dependence on specific outcomes begins to dissolve. This does not lead to passivity or lack of ambition. Instead, it creates a cleaner form of engagement with life. Actions arise from clarity rather than compulsion. Work is performed with attention and care, but without the constant background noise of worry. Success is appreciated, failure is absorbed as learning, and neither is allowed to define personal worth. A person begins to experience a sense of participation rather than ownership, as if life is unfolding through them rather than being forcibly shaped by them. Such a perspective transforms the meaning of control. What was once seen as personal power over circumstances now appears limited and often illusory. The body ages on its own schedule, emotions arise without permission, and countless external forces influence every situation. Trying to dominate this vast network of causes and effects becomes exhausting. Gradually, a more harmonious approach emerges, working with the flow of events rather than resisting them at every step. This harmony is not fatalistic surrender. It is intelligent cooperation with reality. Just as a skilled sailor cannot command the wind but can adjust the sails, a wise individual learns to respond skillfully to changing conditions. Hesitation. Life begins to feel less like a battlefield and more like a dynamic partnership. As resistance weakens, inner silence grows stronger. This silence is not merely the absence of noise but a steady presence beneath mental activity. Thoughts continue to arise, but they lose their power to dominate attention. Worries come and go like passing clouds. Memories surface and fade without pulling the mind into endless replay. Even strong emotions move through awareness without leaving heavy residue. This quiet stability becomes a refuge that does not depend on location or circumstance. In this stillness, perception sharpens. Small details that once went unnoticed become vivid. The rhythm of breathing, the texture of sound, the subtle shifts in mood during conversations, everything feels more immediate. Life regains a freshness that had been dulled by constant mental distraction. Ordinary experiences carry a sense of quiet wonder, not because they are extraordinary, but because they are finally seen without filters of judgment and expectation. With this clarity comes a deeper understanding of interconnectedness. The sense of being a separate individual struggling against the world begins to soften. Every action influences others in visible and invisible ways. Every life is supported by countless seen and unseen contributions. Recognizing this interdependence naturally nurtures humility. Personal achievements no longer feel entirely personal, and failures no longer feel isolating. There is a growing awareness of participating in a vast, shared process of existence. Compassion evolves alongside this realization. It is no longer based on moral rules or social pressure but on direct perception of shared vulnerability. Every person, regardless of status or behavior, is navigating fears, attachments, and misunderstandings. Some express pain through anger, others through withdrawal, and many through restless striving. Seeing this common struggle reduces harsh judgment. Forgiveness becomes easier, not because harmful actions are excused, but because their roots are understood. Even the concept of spirituality undergoes refinement. The need for labels, affiliations, and external validation fades into the background. Sacredness is no longer confined to specific rituals or locations. It begins to reveal itself in ordinary moments, in quiet reflection, in honest work, in simple presence with another human being. The extraordinary is recognized within the ordinary, dissolving the need to chase dramatic experiences. As ego-driven motivations weaken, a more natural ethical sensitivity emerges. Decisions begin aligning with a deeper sense of balance rather than fear of punishment or desire for praise. Harm feels disturbing not because of imposed rules but because separation itself feels less convincing. Kindness becomes practical wisdom rather than moral performance. Simplicity replaces the constant effort to appear impressive. Yet this growing ease does not mean the journey has ended. In fact, greater awareness often reveals subtler layers of illusion. Pride can quietly attach itself to humility. The idea of being spiritually advanced can become another identity trap. Moments of clarity can create new expectations that disturb inner peace when they fade. Recognizing these patterns requires even finer observation and continued honesty. Gradually, the search itself begins to lose urgency. The restless need to become something dissolves into a quieter appreciation of being. There is less fascination with future enlightenment and more attention to present awareness. Time feels less like a race and more like a continuous unfolding. Past regrets loosen their grip, and future anxieties soften as trust in the natural process deepens. And still, beyond this calm understanding lies an even more profound shift, a transformation in how reality itself is perceived. The boundary between inner and outer, observer and observed, begins to blur in subtle ways. Awareness starts turning back upon itself, raising questions that move beyond philosophy into direct experience, inviting the seeker into dimensions of perception where language grows quiet and understanding becomes something far more intimate than thought. At a certain depth of inner stillness, the familiar sense of being a separate observer begins to loosen in ways that are difficult to describe but unmistakable in experience. Ordinarily, life feels divided into clear categories. There is a person who sees, and there is a world that is seen. Thoughts appear to belong to an individual mind, and events seem to unfold outside it. This division feels so natural that it is rarely questioned. Yet as awareness becomes more refined and less entangled in mental noise, the boundary between inner, without a thinker behind it, sounds are heard, sensations are felt, and thoughts pass through awareness, yet there is no strong impulse to claim them as personal. This shift is subtle, almost gentle, but its implications are profound. The constant mental commentary that once reinforced identity grows quieter. In its place appears a spacious presence that simply allows everything to be as it is. Within this presence, the struggle to maintain a consistent self-image begins to dissolve. The personality still functions, conversations still happen, responsibilities are still met, but they no longer feel like performances staged to defend an identity. Reactions become simpler and more direct. There is less calculation about how one appears and more sincerity in how one responds. The weight of self-consciousness lifts, replaced by a natural ease. As the sense of separateness softens, fear of the unknown also loses intensity. Much of fear is rooted in the instinct to protect a defined self against external threats. When that rigid sense of self becomes more fluid, the urgency of constant psychological defense decreases. Life continues with its uncertainties, yet the mind no longer insists on absolute guarantees. A quiet trust develops, not based on belief but on direct experience of being supported by a larger flow of existence. This trust allows surrender to take on a new meaning. It is no longer associated with weakness or resignation but with alignment. Instead of fighting every unfolding moment, there is a willingness to move with circumstances while maintaining inner clarity. Effort still arises when needed, but it comes from responsiveness rather than resistance. The difference feels like swimming with the current instead of against it. In this alignment, Even ordinary activities carry a sense of completeness. Walking, speaking, eating, and working no longer feel like steps towards some future fulfillment. They become expressions of presence themselves. The mind's habit of postponing contentment begins to fade. There is less obsession with reaching the next milestone and more appreciation for immediate experience. Silence deepens beyond the absence of thought. It becomes a living stillness that underlies all activity. From this stillness, thoughts appear like ripples on a vast surface, temporary and light. Emotions move through without disturbing the depth beneath them. Even intense situations fail to shake the fundamental calm that has taken root. This calm is not forced, it arises naturally when mental resistance weakens. Perception of time also changes in subtle ways. The past no longer feels like a heavy chain of memories defining identity, and the future loses its grip as a source of constant anticipation. Attention settles more easily into the present, where life is actually unfolding. Decisions are made with practical consideration, yet without excessive mental projection. This grounded presence brings clarity that hurried thinking often obscures. A gentle sense of unity begins to reveal itself through everyday experience. Nature, people, and surroundings no longer feel entirely separate from awareness. The same presence that witnesses thoughts seems to extend into the environment. This does not appear as a mystical vision but as a quiet recognition that everything participates in the same field of existence. The division between me and world becomes less convincing. From this recognition flows a deeper compassion that requires no effort. Kindness arises naturally because harming others feels increasingly unnatural, almost like harming oneself. Patience grows because there is less personal agenda demanding constant priority. Listening becomes more attentive, and speech becomes more thoughtful. Relationships shift from transactions driven by expectation to connections grounded in shared being. Yet even these profound shifts are not treated as final achievements. Any attempt to claim them as personal accomplishments subtly revives the ego that had been fading. Awareness continues refining itself, noticing how easily pride can arise around spiritual clarity. This observation keeps the journey honest and grounded. The process becomes less about attaining special states and more about remaining open and sincere in each moment. Gradually, the distinction between spiritual practice and daily life dissolves. There is no longer a need to withdraw from the world to find peace, nor to chase intense experiences to feel connected. The ordinary flow of living becomes the practice itself. Each interaction, challenge, and quiet moment serves as an opportunity to remain aware and balanced. And still, beyond this quiet unity lies an even deeper mystery, a recognition. Awareness rests in direct experience, open and alert. In that openness, life reveals itself not as a problem to solve but as a continuous unfolding to witness. The journey that began with confronting fear and illusion now matures into a peaceful intimacy with existence itself. Yet this intimacy is not an endpoint. It is an invitation into ever deepening clarity, where each moment quietly reveals new dimensions of understanding, drawing the seeker further into the vast silence from which all experience arises. There is a quiet maturity that arises when seeking begins to fade and simple presence takes its place. The restless urge to chase extraordinary states slowly dissolves, replaced by a grounded ease that does not depend on circumstances. Life continues with its shifting rhythms, yet the inner atmosphere feels more stable, like a deep ocean that remains calm even when waves move across its surface. This steadiness does not come from controlling experience but from understanding its nature. Attention becomes softer and more inclusive. Instead of narrowing around personal concerns, awareness opens to the wider field of life unfolding in every direction. Small details, the tone of a voice, the subtle play of light and shadow, the rhythm of breath, are noticed without effort. Nothing appears trivial because each moment feels complete in itself. The mind no longer rushes to label experiences as important or unimportant. Everything is allowed to exist without resistance. In this openness, the old habit of psychological comparison weakens. The constant measurement of success and failure, gain and loss, superiority and inferiority loses its urgency. Achievements are appreciated without becoming sources of identity, and setbacks are absorbed without turning into burdens of self-doubt. A natural balance emerges, allowing engagement with the world while remaining inwardly free. Relationships begin reflecting this inner clarity. Interactions feel less like negotiations between competing egos and more like shared expressions of life. Listening deepens because there is less mental noise preparing responses or defending positions. Speech becomes simpler and more sincere, free from the need to impress or dominate. Even silence shared with others feels comfortable, no longer requiring constant conversation to fill space. Emotional life also finds a new equilibrium. Feelings continue to arise, sometimes intensely, yet they move through awareness without leaving long shadows. Joy is experienced fully without clinging, and sadness flows without becoming a personal story of suffering. Anger may appear but dissolves more quickly when not fed by repetitive thought. This fluidity creates resilience, allowing the heart to remain open without feeling overwhelmed. As inner resistance fades further, acceptance matures into quiet gratitude. Ordinary existence, waking, breathing, walking, working, begins to feel like a subtle gift rather than a routine burden. This gratitude does not depend on everything going well. Even challenges are seen as part of the natural movement of life, offering opportunities for patience and understanding. The sense of being in conflict with reality gradually disappears. A deeper humility develops alongside this gratitude. Personal knowledge feels limited compared to the vastness of existence. Firm opinions soften, replaced by curiosity and willingness to see multiple perspectives. The need to assert certainty diminishes. Instead of clinging to rigid conclusions, the mind remains flexible and open, recognizing that truth often reveals itself gradually. This humility allows a more harmonious relationship with uncertainty. The future remains unknown, yet it no longer feels threatening. Plans are made with care, but their outcomes are not clutched tightly. There is trust that whatever unfolds can be met with awareness and balance. This trust reduces anxiety and brings a sense of quiet confidence that does not rely on external assurance. Even the idea of spiritual attainment loses its appeal. Experiences that once seemed significant are now understood as temporary movements within awareness. There is less fascination with altered states and more appreciation for simple clarity. The extraordinary is no longer separated from the ordinary. Every moment holds the same potential for presence. This naturalness brings a feeling of returning home, not to a physical place but to a way of being that feels authentic and unforced. Effort becomes more efficient because it is not wasted on internal conflict. Decisions arise from calm observation rather than emotional turbulence. Life feels less like a struggle to become someone and more like a graceful participation in an ongoing process. Compassion continues deepening in helping another feels as natural as caring for one's own body, because the sense of separation has softened significantly. Moments of solitude grow richer as well. Being alone no longer triggers restlessness or loneliness. Silence becomes nourishing, offering space for reflection and renewal. There is comfort in simply sitting without distraction, observing thoughts and sensations pass like drifting clouds. This ease with solitude strengthens inner independence while enriching connections with others. Gradually, awareness settles into a gentle rhythm that feels both alert and relaxed. Life unfolds without the constant interference of mental resistance. Experiences come and go, yet something steady remains, a quiet presence that neither clings nor rejects. This presence feels intimate and familiar, as if it has always been there beneath layers of distraction. And yet, even within this profound simplicity, a subtle mystery remains. The nature of awareness itself invites deeper contemplation. Questions arise not from confusion but from wonder. What is this silent presence that observes all experience without being altered by it? Where does perception arise from, and where does it dissolve? These questions are not pursued through analysis alone but through direct observation, inviting attention to turn inward once more. In that inward turning, the journey continues beyond concepts and explanations, moving toward an even deeper intimacy with existence, a quiet exploration where understanding no longer depends on words, and where the boundary between observer and life itself grows ever more transparent. At the deepest layers of inner exploration, attention begins to rest not on experiences themselves but on the silent background in which all experiences appear. Thoughts, emotions, and sensations continue to arise and dissolve, yet something remains unchanged beneath their movement. This underlying presence does not demand recognition, yet it quietly supports every moment of perception. When awareness turns gently toward this constant background, a profound stillness begins to reveal itself. This stillness is not something created through effort. It is discovered when mental noise subsides and the need to chase or avoid experience relaxes. The mind, once restless and scattered, now feels like a clear sky in which passing clouds no longer create disturbance. Even when thoughts arise, they seem lighter, less intrusive, unable to obscure the vast calm that lies beneath them. In this calm presence, identity loses its rigid boundaries. The sense of being a separate individual, defined by personal history and future ambitions, softens into a more fluid experience of simply existing. The body continues its functions, conversations happen, work gets done, yet the feeling of ownership becomes less intense. Life feels less like something possessed and more like something witnessed and lived simultaneously. As this recognition deepens, the fear of dissolution begins to fade. The idea of losing control once seemed threatening because identity depended on maintaining structure and certainty. But now, uncertainty feels natural, even peaceful. The constant effort to define everything gives way to quiet acceptance of mystery. Instead of needing firm answers, awareness becomes comfortable resting in open questions. This openness brings a subtle shift in how reality is perceived. Experiences no longer feel fragmented into separate categories of inner and outer. Sensations, sounds, thoughts, and surroundings appear as interconnected movements within one seamless field of awareness. The division between observer and observed becomes increasingly difficult to locate. Perception continues, but the one who claims ownership of perception feels less substantial. Such moments do not feel dramatic or theatrical. They are quiet, almost ordinary, yet deeply transformative. A person may be walking, listening to the wind, or sitting silently, when a gentle recognition arises that everything is unfolding effortlessly. Breathing happens, hearing happens, thinking happens, all without a central controller managing the process. Life reveals itself as a spontaneous flow rather than a sequence directed by a separate self. This realization does not remove individuality in practical life. Personality remains, preferences exist, and responsibilities continue. But these elements are seen as functional roles rather than absolute identities. Like characters in a play, they serve a purpose without defining the entire reality of the one experiencing them. This perspective brings lightness and flexibility, reducing the heaviness of personal drama. A deep sense of freedom accompanies this shift. Freedom not as the ability to do anything desired, but as liberation, as forced tolerance, but as understanding that life moves according to countless interconnected causes beyond personal command. With resistance fading, peace becomes more stable and less dependent on favorable conditions. Noise does not completely disturb it, nor does silence define it. Activity flows on the surface while stillness remains underneath. Even complex situations are met with greater clarity because the mind is not clouded by excessive emotional reaction. Responses become more thoughtful, emerging from balance rather than impulse. Compassion deepens into a quiet reverence for life in all forms. Every being appears as an expression of the same mysterious existence. Differences in behavior and belief no longer create strong divisions. Instead, diversity feels like varied expressions of a shared essence. This perception nurtures patience and kindness without effort, as understanding replaces judgment. As awareness continues settling into its natural state, the need for spiritual language or symbolic frameworks diminishes. Words feel limited in capturing the subtlety of direct experience. Silence communicates more than explanation. Simple presence becomes more meaningful than elaborate philosophies. Truth is no longer something to describe but something quietly lived. The ordinary world remains unchanged in appearance, yet it feels profoundly different in quality. Colors seem richer, sounds clearer, and moments more vivid because they are not filtered through constant mental commentary. Each experience stands on its own, complete and unburdened by comparison with the past or projection into the future. In this simplicity, life feels deeply intimate. Nothing is distant or abstract. The separation between self and existence becomes increasingly transparent, like a thin veil slowly dissolving. There is a gentle recognition that what was once sought externally has always been present as the core of awareness itself. And yet, even this clarity carries no sense of finality. The mystery of existence remains vast and inexhaustible. Awareness continues deepening without needing to arrive anywhere. There is peace in not reaching conclusions, in allowing life to unfold without forcing definitions. What remains is a quiet sense of unity, not an idea to believe in, but a living experience that expresses itself through calm presence, natural compassion, and effortless participation in the flow of existence. The journey that began with confronting fear and illusion now rests in a simplicity beyond striving, where being itself feels complete, yet endlessly open to deeper realization. There is a gentle stage in inner growth where nothing dramatic seems to happen on the surface, yet a profound transformation continues quietly within. Life moves in its ordinary rhythm, conversations unfold, responsibilities are handled, and days pass much like before, but the inner relationship with experience has changed permanently. What once felt heavy now feels lighter. What once created agitation now passes more easily. The difference is subtle yet unmistakable. like waking from a long dream and realizing the tension carried inside it was never truly necessary. Awareness now rests more naturally in the present moment. Attention no longer rushes constantly toward future outcomes or circles endlessly around past memories. Planning still occurs when needed, reflection still happens when useful, but these mental activities no longer dominate the entire field of consciousness. The present feels sufficient. There is a quiet contentment in simply being where one is, doing what needs to be done, without the constant pressure to be somewhere else. This contentment is not laziness or lack of aspiration. It is a form of psychological completeness that allows action to arise from clarity rather than restlessness. Goals may still exist, ambitions may still guide effort, yet they no longer define personal worth. Success does not inflate identity, and setbacks do not diminish inner stability. There is a growing sense that one's value does not depend on circumstances but flows from a deeper source of presence. The mind itself feels more transparent. Thoughts arise like brief ripples and dissolve without leaving strong traces. Old patterns of overthinking gradually weaken because they are seen clearly as repetitive and unnecessary. Worry loses much of its influence when it is observed without engagement. The mental space once filled with constant commentary now feels open and breathable, allowing perception to remain fresh and direct. Emotional experiences also become less entangled. Feelings move through awareness naturally, without turning into prolonged psychological stories. A moment of sadness is simply remain sensitive without being overwhelmed. Relationships deepen through this clarity. There is less desire to control others and more willingness to understand them. Differences in opinion no longer feel like threats that must be defeated. Conversations become opportunities to connect rather than compete. Even conflicts are approached with patience, as the impulse to defend ego weakens significantly. Listening becomes more attentive, and responses become more thoughtful. A natural kindness begins expressing itself in simple ways. Small gestures of care arise spontaneously, without calculation or desire for recognition. Helping others feels natural, like extending one's own well-being rather than performing a moral duty. Compassion no longer depends on personal preference. It grows from the recognition that all beings share vulnerability, confusion, and the search for peace. This recognition softens harsh judgments. Instead of quickly labeling actions as good or bad, there is curiosity about the conditions that shaped them. Understanding replaces condemnation. Forgiveness becomes easier because the illusion of separateness continues dissolving. The pain of others feels closer, more relatable, as if shared within the same field of existence. A deeper harmony with nature also develops. The environment is no longer viewed merely as a backdrop for human activity but as a living presence intertwined with one's own existence. Time spent in natural surroundings feels restorative, not because it offers escape, but because it resonates with the quiet simplicity growing within. The rhythms of wind, water, and sky mirror an inner stillness that words cannot fully describe. Silence becomes increasingly valuable. Not just the absence of sound, but the absence of mental urgency. Sitting quietly, walking alone, or observing the world without distraction brings a sense of renewal. These moments no longer feel empty. They feel rich with subtle awareness, as if existence reveals itself more clearly when noise subsides. As inner quiet deepens, the need to constantly define oneself fades further. Identity feels more like a practical tool than a permanent structure. Roles are played when necessary, but they are not clung to rigidly. This flexibility allows graceful adaptation to changing circumstances. Life becomes less of a performance and more of an authentic expression. Even the idea of a spiritual journey becomes less important. There is no longer a strong sense of moving toward a distant destination. Growth continues, yet it feels natural rather than forced. Each moment offers its own completeness. The extraordinary hides within the ordinary, waiting only for quiet attention to reveal its depth. A gentle trust in life strengthens steadily. Uncertainty remains, yet it no longer produces intense anxiety. There is confidence in the ability to meet challenges with awareness and balance. This trust does not rely on optimistic beliefs but on direct experience of inner resilience. Gradually, existence feels less like a problem to solve and more like a mystery to life. Questions may still arise, but they no longer demand urgent answers. Curiosity replaces fear. Presence replaces striving. Life unfolds as an ongoing exploration rather than a race toward achievement. And within this calm participation, a final subtle realization begins to emerge, that the awareness witnessing all experience is not separate from the very life it observes. the observer and the unfolding world begin to feel like reflections within the same boundless presence, inviting an even deeper recognition that dissolves the last traces of division and reveals a unity too intimate for words. At the quiet edge of inner realization, a final softening begins to take place, almost too subtle to notice at first. The sense of being a separate individual, observing life from a distance, gradually loosens its remaining grip. Awareness no longer feels like something located inside a person looking outward at the world. Instead, there is a gentle recognition that experience itself is happening within a vast, indivisible field of presence. The observer and the observed are not two distinct realities but expressions of the same underlying existence. This shift does not arrive with dramatic visions or emotional intensity. It appears in ordinary moments, while walking through a familiar street, sitting quietly at dawn, or listening to the soft hum of distant sounds. Suddenly, the usual boundary between inside and outside feels less convincing. Perception continues normally, yet the feeling of ownership fades. Seeing happens, hearing happens, breathing happens, but there is no strong sense of a separate doer behind these processes. A profound simplicity reveals itself here. Life once felt deliberate now seems part of a seamless flow. The idea of controlling every step softens into participation within a larger movement that was always present. This recognition brings a deep and stable peace. It is not the fragile calm that depends on silence or favorable circumstances. Noise, activity, and unpredictability may continue, yet the inner stillness remains undisturbed. Experience flows across the surface of awareness like reflections on water, unable to disturb the depth beneath. There is comfort in knowing that nothing needs to be resisted for peace to remain intact. Fear diminishes further because there is no rigid identity left to defend. Without the constant effort to protect a defined self-image, life's uncertainties feel less threatening. Change is no longer an enemy but a natural expression of existence. Beginnings and endings are seen as movements within a continuous whole rather than personal gains and losses. Time itself feels different in this clarity. The past appears as memory arising in the present, and the future as imagination forming now. Attention rests more easily in immediate experience, where life truly unfolds. The pressure of becoming something gradually dissolves into the ease of simply being. A natural joy begins to surface, quiet, steady, and independent of external stimulation. This joy does not come from achievement or excitement but from harmony with existence itself. Even simple activities carry a subtle sense of completeness. Drinking water, feeling sunlight, or hearing the wind becomes quietly fulfilling when nothing is mentally demanded from the moment. Compassion deepens into an almost instinctive sensitivity to life. Every being appears as an expression of the same underlying presence. Helping others no longer feels like a moral obligation but like an extension of natural understanding. Kindness flows effortlessly because separation feels less real than connection. Words and concepts lose much of their importance at this stage. Intellectual explanations seem limited compared to direct experience. Silence communicates more than philosophy. Truth feels less like an idea to grasp and more like a reality quietly lived. The need to convince others or prove understanding fades, replaced by humble presence. Even spiritual identity dissolves. There is no longer a strong need to label oneself as a seeker or an awakened person. Such labels feel unnecessary, even restrictive. What remains is simple awareness expressing itself through ordinary living. Nothing special needs to be claimed, and nothing needs to be rejected. The world continues as it always has, cities remain busy, nature moves in cycles, people pursue their goals, yet everything appears softer, more interconnected. Differences remain visible, but they no longer create deep divisions. Diversity feels like the many faces of one continuous existence. In this unity, acceptance becomes effortless. Experiences are allowed to arise and pass without clinging or resistance. Joy and sorrow, gain and loss, praise and blame move through life like changing seasons. None of them define the underlying presence that remains constant throughout. There is a sense of returning to something deeply familiar, as if the search that once seemed urgent was guiding awareness back to its own natural state. Nothing new has been acquired, yet everything feels different because perception itself has clarified. The extraordinary reveals itself within the simplest moments. And still, this realization carries no final conclusion. Existence remains an open mystery, endlessly unfolding. Awareness continues to deepen without needing to reach an endpoint. Life expresses itself in infinite forms, each moment offering fresh insight. What remains is a quiet wholeness, a way of being where nothing is separate, nothing is rejected, and nothing is clung to. The journey that began with confronting fear, illusion, and attachment now rests in effortless presence. Experience flows freely, and awareness stands open, intimate with all that arises. In this gentle completeness, life is no longer something to escape, control, or fully understand. It is simply lived, moment by moment, within a boundless presence that has always been here, silently embracing everything. There comes a serene clarity when even the idea of progressing on a path begins to dissolve. The mind, which once measured growth through milestones and breakthroughs, grows quiet in its need to evaluate. Life no longer feels like a ladder to climb or a destination to reach. Instead, it unfolds like an endless horizon, vast and open, where each step is complete in itself. The urgency that once fueled seeking transforms into a gentle attentiveness to the present, as if awareness has finally a sense of personal strain behind them. Work happens with focus but without inner friction. Decisions are made with care yet without excessive doubt. The mind no longer tangles itself in endless what-ifs because trust has replaced constant second-guessing. There is an intuitive sense that each moment carries its own direction when met with clarity. This trust does not come from blind optimism. It grows from repeated recognition that life continues to unfold regardless of personal control. Breathing happens on its own. Thoughts appear without invitation. The heart continues beating without supervision. Seeing this effortless orchestration of existence weakens the illusion that everything depends on individual will. A softer relationship with control emerges, allowing participation without the burden of domination. As inner tension dissolves, perception becomes remarkably direct. Situations are seen for what they are rather than filtered through layers of preference and prejudice. Reactions slow down, leaving space for understanding before response. This pause changes the quality of experience. Challenges are approached with steadiness instead of panic. Pleasant moments are enjoyed without clinging. Even uncertainty feels lighter when not burdened by catastrophic imagination. The personality continues functioning, yet it feels more like a practical instrument than a fixed identity. Roles are played when needed, professional, friend, family member, but they no longer define the entirety of one's being. Just as clothing can be worn without mistaking it for the body, identities are used without being mistaken for the self. This creates remarkable psychological flexibility. When circumstances change, adaptation feels natural rather than threatening. A quiet joy permeates simple living. Ordinary routines carry a sense of gentle fulfillment when attention is fully present. Washing dishes, walking through familiar streets, or sitting silently by a window becomes rich with subtle detail. Life is no longer postponed in anticipation of dramatic events. Each moment, however simple, feels worthy of presence. Emotional waves still arise, but they no longer sweep awareness away. Feelings are experienced intimately yet lightly, like weather passing through open space. There is room for sadness without despair, for excitement without restlessness, for affection without possessiveness. This emotional balance allows the heart to remain open while maintaining inner stability. Relationships reflect this new ease. Interactions become less about extracting validation and more about genuine connection. Listening deepens because attention is not preoccupied with self-concern. Differences in opinion do not escalate into personal conflict so easily. There is patience to understand perspectives shaped by different experiences. Compassion flows more freely when the need to defend identity weakens. A sense of shared humanity grows stronger. Every person appears as a traveler navigating joys and struggles, shaped by causes often invisible on the surface. Harsh judgments soften as understanding deepens. Forgiveness becomes more accessible, not as a moral obligation but as a natural outcome of seeing the complexity of life. Nature also feels more intimate. The movement of trees in the wind, the rhythm of rainfall, and the changing colors of the sky seem less like distant scenery and more like expressions of the same living presence that breathes within. Time spent in quiet natural settings resonates deeply, reflecting the stillness discovered within awareness itself. Silence becomes a trusted companion. It no longer feels empty or awkward. Instead, it offers a space where awareness can simply be, free from constant stimulation. In silence, the subtle richness of existence becomes clearer. There is no need to fill every moment with activity. Resting in quiet presence feels nourishing and complete. Gradually, the sense of separation that once defined experience becomes increasingly transparent. The world is no longer perceived as something happening outside a personal center. Instead, everything appears as a seamless unfolding within one indivisible field of awareness. This recognition is gentle and continuous, without dramatic proclamation. It feels natural, like recognizing something that was always obvious but overlooked. Yet even this clarity carries humility. There is no impulse to declare final understanding. Mystery remains alive, inviting continued openness. Awareness does not claim ownership of truth, it simply remains receptive to the unfolding of existence. This humility protects against the subtle return of ego disguised as spiritual certainty. Life now feels less like a puzzle demanding solutions and more like a living and within this effortless flow, awareness continues to deepen quietly, revealing subtler layers of unity and presence. There is a sense that understanding has no final boundary, that existence is endlessly revealing itself through simple moments of attention. The journey does not conclude with grand declarations but continues in gentle stillness, where every breath carries the quiet wonder of being inseparable from the vast life that unfolds everywhere. In the quiet continuity of awareness, life begins to feel like a gentle unfolding that needs no dramatic interpretation. The urge to analyze every experience, to assign meaning and narrative to each moment, gradually fades into a more relaxed intimacy with what is happening now. Thoughts still arise, but they no longer demand complete attention. Emotions still move through the heart, yet they are no longer seen as permanent definitions of identity. Everything flows with a natural rhythm, like waves rising and falling in an endless ocean of presence. This stage of understanding carries a remarkable lightness. The psychological weight once created by constant striving slowly dissolves. There is less concern about becoming extraordinary and more comfort in being authentic. Life is approached with sincerity rather than performance. Actions arise from genuine necessity instead of the need to impress or prove worth. This simplicity clears much of the inner noise that once complicated decision-making. Even challenges are met with a calmer mind. Difficulties no longer appear as personal punishments or unfair obstacles. They are seen as natural movements within the broader fabric of existence. This perspective does not eliminate effort or responsibility, but it removes the additional layer of mental resistance that turns pain into prolonged suffering. Problems are addressed with clarity, then released without lingering mental replay. A deeper acceptance of human limitation emerges as well. The need to have all answers weakens. It becomes comfortable to admit uncertainty, to acknowledge not knowing. This humility opens space for continuous learning and genuine dialogue. Conversations become explorations rather than competitions. Listening grows more attentive because there is less urgency to defend fixed viewpoints. The mind develops a quiet resilience. Unexpected changes still occur, yet they no longer destabilize inner balance as easily. There is confidence in the capacity to adapt, to meet life as it comes. This confidence is not loud or prideful, it feels steady and grounded, like a tree deeply rooted in soil that bends with strong winds but does not break. As inner resistance fades further, a gentle gratitude begins to color ordinary perception. Small moments, a warm cup held between the hands, a familiar voice, the softness of evening light, carry quiet richness. Appreciation arises naturally, without effort to force positivity. Even simple existence feels quietly meaningful when attention is not distracted by endless comparison. The sense of time also softens. The past no longer dominates through regret, nor does the future constantly pull attention through anticipation. Planning continues where necessary, yet awareness remains anchored in immediate experience. Life feels less rushed, more spacious, as if each moment contains enough room to breathe fully. In this spaciousness, relationships grow more harmonious. The need to control others diminishes, replaced by respect for their individual journeys. Patience develops naturally when expectations loosen. Love expresses itself through understanding and steady presence rather than dramatic displays. Even moments of disagreement are handled with greater care, as emotional reactions no longer escalate as quickly. Compassion matures into a quiet sensitivity toward all forms of life. The struggles of others are recognized with empathy rather than judgment. Acts of kindness arise spontaneously, without calculation or desire for recognition. Supporting others feels like a natural extension of shared existence rather than a moral obligation imposed from outside. Silence deepens into a source of nourishment. It is no longer merely the absence of sound but a living stillness that supports clarity. Sitting quietly, observing the flow of breath, or simply resting without distraction reveals a sense of completeness that does not depend on constant stimulation. This inner quiet becomes a stable refuge amid the movement of daily life. Gradually, the distinction between spiritual insight and ordinary living fades almost completely. There is no longer a separate state that feels sacred apart from daily responsibilities. Work, rest, conversation, and solitude all arise within the same field of awareness. Every moment becomes equally suitable for appears as an interconnected movement within a shared reality. This recognition brings natural harmony, reducing the impulse to compete excessively or defend rigid personal boundaries. Yet with all this clarity comes a deepening humility. The mystery of existence remains vast and incomprehensible to the thinking mind. Attempts to capture it in rigid concepts feel limiting. Instead, there is quiet appreciation for the unknown, an openness that allows life to reveal itself without force. This openness brings a sense of peaceful incompleteness, not lacking, but endlessly unfolding. There is no final conclusion to reach, no ultimate statement to declare. Awareness simply remains attentive, receptive, and present. Living in this way feels like moving with the natural current of existence rather than struggling against it. Each moment arrives fresh, unburdened by excessive mental projection. Experience flows freely, and awareness remains gently anchored in the simplicity of being. And in this effortless presence, something profoundly reassuring becomes clear. Nothing was ever truly missing. The peace once sought through effort has always existed quietly beneath layers of mental noise. Recognizing this does not end life's movement. Instead, it allows every moment to be lived with deeper intimacy, softer perception, and an abiding sense of unity that continues revealing itself without end. There is a quiet settling that happens when the search for something greater finally gives way to a deep appreciation of what already is. The mind, which once raced toward distant ideas of fulfillment, begins to relax into the simplicity of present living. Nothing extraordinary needs to occur for peace to be felt. Ordinary moments carry their own completeness when attention rests gently within them. A soft clarity emerges, like clear water after long turbulence, revealing that much of life's struggle came from constant mental resistance rather than reality itself. In this calm awareness, experience is no longer divided so sharply into desirable and undesirable categories. Pleasure is welcomed without clinging, and discomfort is allowed without immediate rejection. This balanced openness changes the texture of living. Emotional reactions soften because there is less insistence that life must follow personal preferences. Events unfold, and awareness meets them with patience instead of protest. Thoughts continue to appear, but they lose their heavy authority. The mind no longer treats each thought as an urgent command requiring reaction. Instead, thoughts are seen as temporary mental formations, useful in practical matters but unable to define the deeper presence beneath them. This recognition creates psychological spaciousness. Worry diminishes because imagined futures are no longer mistaken for immediate reality. The sense of identity becomes increasingly light. Personal history remains as memory, yet it does not feel like a rigid story that must constantly be defended. Roles are performed where necessary, but they are not confused with the essence of being. This flexibility brings a natural ease in social situations. There is less anxiety about reputation and less pressure to maintain appearances. Authenticity replaces performance. Daily life takes on a quieter richness. Simple routines become opportunities for attentive presence rather than tasks to rush through. The act of walking, eating, speaking, or listening carries a subtle sense of participation in a larger rhythm of existence. Nothing feels entirely insignificant because each moment expresses the same underlying life. A gentle resilience develops in the face of difficulty. Challenges still arise, yet they are no longer viewed as personal attacks. Pain is experienced directly without the added layers of blame and narrative that once intensified it. This allows practical responses to emerge more clearly. Problems are addressed with steadiness rather than emotional turbulence. Relationships deepen through this stability. Listening becomes more sincere because attention is not clouded by self-concern. Others feel more comfortable expressing themselves when they sense genuine presence rather than judgment. Conflicts soften as the need to dominate or prove oneself weakens. There is greater willingness to understand differing perspectives without turning disagreement into hostility. Compassion matures into quiet understanding. Every person is recognized as carrying unseen struggles and private fears. This awareness dissolves harsh judgment and encourages patience. Acts of kindness arise naturally, not from obligation but from a felt connection with others. Supporting someone else feels less like a sacrifice and more like an expression of shared humanity. A subtle harmony with life's adaptability will meet whatever unfolds. This trust reduces the mental habit of rehearsing worst-case scenarios. Moments of silence gain deeper meaning. Sitting quietly without distraction reveals a peaceful presence that does not depend on activity. Silence feels alive, filled with gentle awareness rather than emptiness. Time spent alone becomes restorative, allowing the mind to reset and the heart to settle naturally. As awareness stabilizes, perception becomes clearer and more immediate. Situations are seen more directly without heavy interpretation. Emotional triggers lose much of their force because reactions are observed before they escalate. This creates freedom to respond thoughtfully rather than impulsively. The boundary between inner and outer experience continues to soften. The environment no longer feels separate from awareness but part of the same living field. Sounds, sensations, and thoughts arise together in seamless continuity. This recognition brings a quiet sense of unity that words struggle to capture. Humility deepens alongside this clarity. There is less desire to claim understanding or appear wise. Mystery remains vast, and awareness stays open to learning. Spiritual certainty gives way to simple presence. Nothing needs to be proclaimed because truth feels self-evident in lived experience. Gradually, life feels less like a journey toward achievement and more like an ongoing expression of being. The pressure to reach definitive conclusions fades. Each moment offers its own quiet completeness without demanding evaluation. In this gentle way of living, peace is no longer something to pursue. It becomes the natural background of awareness when resistance subsides. Joy appears in simple forms, relationships grow more authentic, and challenges are met with balanced attention. Existence unfolds without hurry, without dramatic declaration, and without the burden of constant striving. Awareness remains open, receptive, and quietly intimate with the flow of life. And within this simplicity, a final understanding begins to whisper that what has been discovered is not a new state to maintain, but the timeless nature of awareness itself, always present beneath thought and identity, patiently waiting to be recognized in the silence of each passing moment. When awareness becomes fully comfortable with itself, life begins to feel astonishingly simple. The mind no longer tries to decorate existence with dramatic meaning or constant interpretation. Moments arrive quietly and pass quietly, yet each one feels complete. There is a natural ease in allowing things to be exactly as they are, without the restless urge to improve, control, or resist every detail. This simplicity does not make life dull. Instead, it reveals a subtle richness that was previously hidden beneath layers of mental noise. The need to chase fulfillment gradually dissolves. Desire still appears in practical forms. Hunger leads to eating, curiosity leads to learning, care leads to action, but the deeper craving for psychological completion fades. There is an understanding that no external achievement can permanently satisfy the mind's endless demands. Seeing this clearly brings relief. Energy once spent on constant striving becomes available for attentive living. Experience flows with a gentle rhythm. Thoughts arise and pass like soft echoes rather than commanding voices. Emotions move through awareness without becoming overwhelming storms. Even intense situations are met with steadiness because there is no rigid self-image left to defend. This stability feels natural, like a mountain standing quietly through changing weather. A quiet contentment colors daily life. Ordinary activities no longer feel like obstacles on the way to something better. They are appreciated as expressions of living itself. Preparing a meal, completing a task, or sitting in stillness carries a sense of calm participation in existence. Nothing feels separate from awareness, everything belongs. The mind grows comfortable with not knowing. Questions about life, death, purpose, and destiny remain, yet they no longer create anxiety. Mystery is welcomed rather than feared. Instead of chasing absolute answers, awareness rests in direct experience. This openness allows deeper understanding to unfold naturally without force. Relationships become gentler and more genuine. Interactions are no longer driven by hidden agendas or emotional dependency. Listening happens with full presence, and speaking arises from sincerity. There is less need to impress and more willingness to connect honestly. This authenticity creates trust and emotional ease. Compassion deepens into quiet sensitivity toward all beings. The struggles of others are felt with empathy rather than judgment. Acts of fade. Silence becomes profoundly nourishing. It is no longer experienced as emptiness but as a living presence filled with subtle awareness. In silence, the mind rests and the heart opens. There is no urgency to fill space with constant stimulation. Simply being becomes enough. Fear loses much of its influence as attachment to identity dissolves. Change is seen as an inherent aspect of existence rather than a threat to personal security. Beginnings and endings are accepted as natural movements within the same continuous flow. This acceptance brings quiet courage to face uncertainty. Perception itself feels clearer and more immediate. The world is experienced without heavy filtering through personal preference and bias. Colors appear richer, sounds more vivid, and moments more intimate. Life feels direct and unmediated, as if awareness touches reality without obstruction. The sense of doership softens further. Actions still occur, choices are still made, yet they feel less like the efforts of an isolated individual and more like expressions of a larger unfolding. Breathing, moving, thinking, and interacting happen spontaneously within the vast process of existence. With this realization comes deep humility. There is no urge to claim enlightenment or special understanding. Labels feel unnecessary and limiting. What remains is simple presence, quiet, attentive, and open. Even the concept of a spiritual path loses its meaning. There is nowhere to arrive and nothing to become. Awareness recognizes itself as the constant background of every experience. Seeking relaxes into being. Life continues with its natural variety, moments of activity and rest, connection and solitude, joy and sorrow. Yet beneath all change remains a steady peace that does not depend on circumstance. This peace feels like home, familiar and unwavering. Existence reveals itself as a seamless whole. The apparent division between inner and outer dissolves into a unified field of presence. Everything arises within the same boundless awareness, like patterns appearing on a vast canvas. There is quiet wonder in recognizing that what was once sought through effort has always been here. Nothing new has been gained, only misunderstanding has fallen away. The simplicity of being stands revealed as deeply complete. And still, awareness remains open, without final conclusion. Life continues to unfold in infinite ways, inviting ongoing discovery. Presence stays gentle and receptive, allowing each moment to arise and dissolve naturally. In this unforced way of living, peace is no longer an achievement but the natural state uncovered when resistance fades. Awareness rests in itself, intimate with all experience, quietly embracing the endless mystery of existence as it moves, breath by breath, through the timeless now. There is a gentle sense of completion that begins to whisper through experience when awareness no longer seeks dramatic transformation. Nothing spectacular announces this shift. Life simply feels settled, like dust that has finally fallen after a long storm. The mind grows quieter, not through force but through understanding. It recognizes that constant striving was never a requirement for wholeness. What remains is a calm intimacy with existence, a soft recognition that being itself is enough. This quiet completeness changes how effort is felt. Actions still arise, responsibilities are still met, yet there is no heavy psychological burden attached to them. Work becomes an expression of participation rather than a struggle for identity. Even complex tasks are handled with a steadier mind because the pressure to prove oneself has faded. There is space to breathe between thoughts, space to respond rather than react. The heart also feels lighter. Emotional experiences continue to move naturally, yet they do not linger as long or weigh as heavily. Sadness passes like evening rain. Joy appears like sunlight through clouds. Neither is grasped tightly. This balance creates a gentle resilience that allows the heart to remain open without fear of being overwhelmed. Daily living takes on a quiet beauty. The simplest experiences, a familiar path, a shared smile, the stillness of early morning, feel meaningful without needing explanation. Attention rests more easily in the present because there is less mental noise pulling it toward imagined futures or remembered pasts. Each moment stands complete in itself. Relationships deepen in subtle ways. Without the constant interference of ego, conversations feel more sincere. Listening becomes effortless because there is genuine interest rather than hidden self-concern. Differences in opinion no longer threaten identity. There is patience to understand and humility to admit uncertainty. This kindness no longer feels like an obligation but like a simple reflection of shared existence. Helping another becomes as natural as breathing, requiring no special recognition. Silence grows increasingly comforting. It no longer feels empty or lonely. Instead, it offers a sense of returning to a quiet inner home. In stillness, awareness rests in itself without distraction. There is no need to fill every moment with activity or conversation. Simply being feels sufficient. The sense of personal identity becomes more transparent. Roles and responsibilities continue, but they are worn lightly, like garments that can be changed when needed. There is less attachment to labels and less concern about how one is perceived. Authenticity replaces performance, bringing ease in social situations and solitude alike. Fear continues to diminish as attachment loosens. The future remains uncertain, yet it no longer appears threatening. Change is recognized as a natural rhythm of existence rather than a disruption of stability. This acceptance brings quiet courage, allowing challenges to be met with clarity instead of anxiety. Perception becomes more direct and vivid. Life is experienced without heavy mental filtering. Sounds, colors, and sensations feel immediate, as if awareness touches them without distance. This clarity brings subtle joy to ordinary moments, revealing richness where monotony once seemed to exist. The illusion of complete control fades further. Actions unfold within a vast network of causes and conditions that no individual can fully command. Recognizing this brings relief from the exhausting effort to dominate every outcome. Participation replaces control, allowing life to flow more naturally. Humility deepens with this understanding. There is no urge to claim special status or spiritual superiority. Awareness remains simple and open, comfortable with not knowing everything. Mystery is no longer a problem to solve but a reality to appreciate. Even the idea of a personal journey begins to dissolve. Growth continues, yet it no longer feels like movement toward a distant destination. Each moment becomes both the path and the arrival. Seeking relaxes into presence. Life unfolds with its natural blend of activity and rest, connection and solitude, joy and difficulty. Beneath these changing experiences remains a steady background of peace. This peace does not need to be protected or maintained through effort. It simply is, like the quiet depth beneath surface waves. A gentle wonder arises in recognizing that nothing essential was ever missing. The search that once seemed urgent was guiding awareness back to its own timeless nature. Nothing new has been added, only layers of misunderstanding have fallen away. And yet, even within this peaceful clarity, existence remains endlessly alive and open. Awareness does not freeze into final conclusions. It stays receptive, allowing each moment to reveal its own subtle truth. Living continues in quiet simplicity, attentive, sincere, and unforced. Awareness rests in itself while embracing the full movement of life. The journey that once felt long and uncertain now reveals itself as a natural unfolding of presence, where every breath carries the soft reminder that wholeness was never elsewhere, but here, quietly shining within the ordinary flow of being. There is a soft stillness that settles when awareness fully relaxes into the rhythm of existence. Nothing needs to be added to the moment, and nothing needs to be removed. Experience unfolds naturally, and awareness rests gently within it, like a calm sky holding drifting clouds without effort. The old habit of mentally interfering with every situation fades, replaced by a quiet trust in the way life moves on its own. This trust changes the quality of perception. Instead of constantly evaluating what is happening, the mind allows experience to reveal itself without resistance. Situations are no longer rushed toward conclusions. There is patience to observe, to listen, and to understand before responding. This pause creates a deeper harmony between awareness and action. A natural balance develops between engagement and rest. Activity happens when required, yet it no longer drains the mind with unnecessary tension. Rest is embraced without guilt, recognized as part of the same living process. Life no longer feels like a race between productivity and exhaustion. It moves with a steadier, more sustainable rhythm. The sense of psychological struggle diminishes further. Problems still arise, but they are approached with clarity instead of emotional resistance. The mind no longer multiplies difficulty by replaying events or imagining endless negative outcomes. Practical challenges are addressed directly, then released. This simplicity, intense emotions can unfold safely. Anger loses its sharp edge when not fueled by ego. Sadness becomes a quiet wave that passes without turning into despair. Joy is experienced fully without clinging or fear of loss. Relationships reflect this inner calm. Interactions feel more relaxed because there is less need to control how others respond. Expectations loosen, allowing people to be as they are. Listening becomes deeper and more sincere. Words are chosen with care, guided by understanding rather than impulse. This gentleness nurtures trust and connection. Compassion flows more freely as the illusion of separation continues dissolving. The suffering of others is recognized with quiet empathy. Kindness arises without calculation, expressed through small, thoughtful gestures. Supporting someone feels like a natural expression of shared existence rather than an obligation. The mind grows comfortable with silence and simplicity. There is no constant urge for stimulation or distraction. Quiet moments feel nourishing, offering space for reflection and renewal. In silence, awareness senses its own depth, steady, open, and untroubled. Identity becomes lighter still. Personal stories lose their rigid hold, seen as temporary narratives rather than fixed definitions. Roles are performed when needed, but they no longer confine awareness. This flexibility brings ease in adapting to changing circumstances. Fear continues to fade as attachment loosens. Uncertainty is no longer perceived as danger but as a natural element of existence. Change is accepted with calm readiness. The future remains open, yet it does not provoke constant worry. There is confidence in the ability to meet life with awareness and balance. Perception feels clearer, less clouded by bias and assumption. Moments are experienced directly, without heavy mental commentary. The world appears vivid and immediate, as if awareness touches reality without distance. Ordinary scenes carry subtle beauty when seen with quiet attention. A deeper humility emerges alongside this clarity. There is less desire to assert certainty or display knowledge. Awareness recognizes the vastness of existence and remains open to continuous learning. Mystery is appreciated rather than resisted. Even spiritual ideas lose their complexity. There is no longer a need for elaborate explanations or symbolic structures. Presence itself feels sufficient. Truth is lived quietly, rather than discussed endlessly. Life unfolds with natural variety, periods of activity and rest, connection and solitude, ease and challenge. Yet beneath all movement remains a steady sense of peace that does not depend on conditions. This peace feels grounded and reliable, like a silent foundation beneath changing scenery. The sense of separation continues dissolving into a gentle unity. Awareness no longer feels confined within a personal boundary. Experience appears as a seamless flow within one indivisible presence. This recognition brings quiet harmony with all forms of life. Gratitude arises naturally for simple existence. Nothing extraordinary needs to happen for contentment to appear. Being itself feels like a subtle gift, quietly sufficient. And still, awareness remains open and unfinalized. There is no urge to declare completion or mastery. Existence continues unfolding infinitely, inviting ongoing discovery and gentle curiosity. Living becomes an expression of calm participation in this boundless process. Awareness rests in its own stillness while embracing every changing moment. Nothing is forced, nothing is resisted. In this effortless harmony, the long search dissolves into simple presence. What remains is a quiet, continuous intimacy with life, steady, sincere, and deeply at peace within the endless flow of existence. A quiet wholeness begins to permeate experience when awareness no longer feels fragmented by inner conflict. The mind, once divided between opposing desires and fears, gradually settles into a unified clarity. There is less internal argument about what should or should not be happening. Life unfolds, and awareness accompanies it gently, like a silent witness that no longer feels the need to interfere. This calm participation brings a sense of inner alignment, as if thoughts, emotions, and actions are moving in the same natural direction. In this alignment, effort becomes smoother and more efficient. Tasks are approached with steady attention rather than hurried tension. There is care in action but no unnecessary strain behind it. The difference is subtle yet powerful. Energy is no longer wasted on resistance, doubt, or the need to prove personal worth. Work becomes a simple expression of responsibility and presence. Moments of pause feel deeply restorative. Stillness is no longer mistaken. Surroundings offers a sense of renewal that constant busyness could never provide. Silence becomes a quiet companion rather than an uncomfortable void. Emotional life grows more transparent. Feelings arise naturally but are no longer amplified by mental storytelling. A wave of irritation passes quickly when not fed by rumination. A moment of sadness moves through without turning into prolonged heaviness. Joy appears lightly, appreciated without fear of losing it. This emotional clarity allows the heart to remain open while maintaining inner balance. Relationships reflect this steadiness. Conversations feel less like negotiations between fragile egos and more like sincere exchanges of perspective. Listening deepens because awareness is not preoccupied with defending personal identity. Responses arise thoughtfully, shaped by understanding rather than impulse. Differences in opinion no longer threaten connection. Compassion becomes more instinctive. The struggles carried by others are recognized with gentle empathy. There is less inclination to judge harshly because awareness sees how fear and confusion influence human behavior. Kindness arises in simple, natural ways: a supportive word, patient attention, quiet assistance. These gestures feel effortless, like extensions of shared humanity. The sense of personal identity continues to soften. Labels and roles remain useful in practical situations, yet they no longer define the whole of being. Awareness feels wider than any description. This flexibility allows graceful adaptation when circumstances shift. There is less fear of change because identity is no longer rigidly attached to fixed ideas. Perception becomes clearer as mental noise subsides. Situations are seen more directly without excessive interpretation. The present moment feels vivid and immediate, unclouded by constant comparison with past or future. Ordinary experiences reveal quiet richness when awareness meets them fully. Fear gradually loses its intensity. Without strong attachment to personal narratives, uncertainty no longer feels deeply threatening. Change is recognized as a natural movement within existence. The future remains unknown, yet there is calm confidence in the ability to respond wisely as events unfold. A deeper trust in life emerges. This trust is not based on assumptions that everything will unfold favorably, but on recognition that awareness can remain steady through both comfort and difficulty. This stability brings courage without aggression and patience without passivity. Gratitude arises softly, independent of dramatic circumstances. Simple aspects of living, breath, light, connection, rest, feel meaningful when noticed with quiet attention. Appreciation grows not from forced positivity but from direct experience of presence. Silence deepens further, revealing an inner stillness untouched by external activity. Even in busy environments, a quiet center remains accessible. This steady presence feels like a refuge that travels everywhere, independent of place or situation. The boundary between inner and outer experience continues dissolving. sounds, sensations, and thoughts appear as movements within the same field of awareness. The sense of being separate from the world weakens, replaced by gentle unity with the flow of existence. Humility grows naturally in this clarity. There is no urge to claim spiritual achievement or special insight. Awareness remains open, recognizing the vast mystery that surrounds all understanding. Not knowing feels comfortable, even peaceful. Life becomes simpler without losing depth. Complexity still exists in practical matters, yet psychological struggle diminishes. Attention returns to what truly matters: presence, sincerity, and balance. Moments pass without the need for dramatic meaning. Experience unfolds quietly, like pages turning in a book that never truly ends. Each scene carries its own completeness. Awareness rests gently within this continuous flow, neither clinging to pleasant moments nor resisting difficult ones. Peace remains steady beneath changing circumstances. And in this steady presence, the long journey of seeking feels like it has gently dissolved into simple being. Nothing special has been attained, yet everything feels quietly transformed. Life continues, breath by breath, within a calm and boundless awareness that asks for nothing and quietly embraces all that comes and goes.